Welcome in this third and last video dedicated to one of the greatest Hong Kong actor, Chow Yun-Fat. We move to the year 1991 with another collaboration between John Woo and Chow Yun-Fat, which is Once a Thief. Once a Thief is not considered as a good John Woo, and for good reasons. He did it just after having directed Bullet in the Head. Bullet in the Head was, unfortunately for him, a financial failure. It didn't work at the box office at all, and it made Golden Princess, the main investor behind the film, bleed money basically. And in order to pay back for this commercial failure, he accepted to do a Chinese New Year film, which is the Chinese New Year being the best time period for a release in Hong Kong and in all the Chinese places, being Taiwan and mainland now. Back then that was not the case for the mainland, but anyway, for Hong Kong, Malaysia, Taiwan, that's a very good time period to have your film being released. And so he did Once a Thief for this time period, and in order to accommodate a more family-friendly audience, he made it more as a comedy compared to some of his previous films, such as the Better Tomorrow, The Killer, or Bullet in the Head in this case. If you know John Woo's career well, you are aware that he was considered for a long time as the king of comedy, actually, the king of Cantonese comedy, alongside Michael Hui, with who he had actually worked on the first film directed by Michael Hui. He was his technical advisor. He was actually his ghost director for the first film he did. And after that, he did a few more comedy, which were hugely successful. But if you have seen those films, you know that John Woo is not that great when it comes to comedy. I think some of them are decent, especially the one he did with Josephine Xiao, but in general he's not a great comedy director. And in Once a Thief we have this problem. We have this problem of the comedy interfering with the other parts of the film, which by itself are not bad. There is a love triangle between Chow Yun-Fat, Cherry Chung, and Leslie Cheung. It's handled adequately by John Woo. You also have some action scenes which are quite decent, but all the drama which is being built up fairly well for the first half of the film ends up being completely ruined in the last half in order to provide laughter for the audience, the main audience, the family audience, which was targeted for this release. And it ends up being quite frustrating. There are things which you expect more from a Wong Jing comedy than from a John Woo film, and that's a bit unfortunate, because you see the potential the film had when it comes to the drama side and the action side, but it's mostly done for laugh and okay, I guess, if you are in the mood for this Wong Jing mix of ingredients. If you are ready for something like that, if you are ready to see something very light and easily forgotten, well, Once a Thief is not a bad choice. But if you want a good John Woo film, then you will necessarily end up being disappointed. Chow Yun-Fat himself, I mean, he's okay if you take him for the drama part and the love story part. He's good, and then at some point he gets into the comedy part, and so he plays comedy-like, as he knows how to do, which means quite a bit of overacting. But it's okay. I mean, if you take it for what it is, for the comedy part as it is, then his acting is okay. The problem is that the comedy part and the drama part don't really mix in this film, and that creates some kind of frustration. So Once a Thief, not the best collaboration between John Woo and Chow Yun-Fat for sure. Still decent if you want to see, I mean, still decent, worth at least a watch once, but probably no more than that. Fortunately, the following year in 1992, the two worked again, but for a movie which was much more memorable. That is Hard Boiled. So Hard Boiled is a cult classic. It's considered as one of the best John Woo, alongside The Killer on A Better Tomorrow. There are good reasons for that. When it comes to action, that's for sure the most impressive work by John Woo. The action scenes are really amazing. They are out of this world. So for that alone, you have to watch Hard Boiled. The rest of the film is still pretty good, pretty solid. The main story it's basically a brotherhood story between two cops, one being played by Chow Yun-Fat, being this hardball character, this cop who really wants to get rid of a cruel triad and is ready to do anything in order to achieve this result. And on the other hand, there is an undercover cop in the triad, played by Tony Leung Chiu-wai, and they are going to bond and join force in order to wipe out these gangsters. If I want to nitpick a little bit, there are two flaws in my opinion in the film, which are very minor flaws. Let's be clear, Hardboiled is a great film, so you should watch it. You should watch it for John Woo, you should watch it for Chow Yun-Fat, you should watch it for Tony Leung, you should watch it for the action, you should watch it for the drama. It's a great film. But I will nitpick a little bit and isolate, in my opinion, two flaws. The first one being actually the character of Chow Yun-Fat. I think the character of Chow Yun-Fat is a bit one-dimensional and is less interesting than the characters played by Tony Leung Chiu-wai, the undercover cop. And sometimes it feels a bit frustrating that more time is devoted to Chow Yun-Fat, whose character is fairly simple, and not enough on the one of Tony Leung Chiu-wai. So that's a minor flaw there when it comes to the story and character development. The second aspect, which I'm a little bit critical about, is the visual of the film, the mood of the film. The music also comes to play, in meaning that there is a bit of Hollywood vibe to it. Hollywood style, Miami Vice, this kind of atmosphere, which is well done, but that's not exactly what I expect or what I want when I watch a Hong Kong film. The film was made this way for a reason that was seen by Terence Chung, the producer, and John Woo as a demo tape, basically for Hollywood executive, for John Woo to be able to move to Hollywood. So that's why there is a bit more Americanized flavor in the visual and in the mood of the film. Still, that's once again, that's a very minor flaw. Some of you may not even consider it a flaw at all. And Hardboiled is, of course, a must-see, a must-have. And if you haven't watched it yet, obviously you should watch it right now. In '92, he collaborated with another of his friend, another of the director who has given him some of his best part. That is Ringo Lam on Full Contact. Full Contact is a Category 3 film. That's Ringo Lam's take of the Category 3 genre, which had started to appear in the early 90s in Hong Kong. Category 3 is a classification system which was introduced in Hong Kong at the end of the 80s. And you had Category 1, Category 2A and B, and Category 3. Category 3 being only for people over 18 years old. And that's obviously the films with the more sex, the more violence, the more realistic things related to triads. So the more edgy subjects being treated in films being categorized Category 3. And because of the introduction of this classification system, some films understood that they could get some good commercial results by putting a lot of sex, by putting a lot of violence, or a lot of concepts which were a bit borderline, kind accumulated with usually a small budget. So small budget, sex, violence, you shoot them quickly and you got them released, and you can get a good amount of money by producing films like that. So it became some kind of competition between several producers and directors during that time in order to get audience attention by producing the most crazy film possible. And Full Contact is not that crazy, but it's part of this category 3 trend. Of course, having Ringo Lam behind the camera, that's more elaborate film than your usual category 3 film. But still, it's a good film. It's interesting. You obviously have sex. You obviously have violence. You have a lot of vulgarity. Actually, that's really the Ringo Lam touch in this film. You have the violence which you can expect. You have a bit of sex as you can expect as well. But the main point is the vulgarity, the perfectly assumed vulgarity of the film. It seems that was what Ringo Lam wanted to do with this film. He really wanted to push the vulgarity as far as he could, but while making it very entertaining at the same time, and that's indeed how the film is. So if you don't mind bad taste made on purpose, you will have a good time watching Full Contact. The film has a great cast, with Chow Yun-Fat playing some kind of variation of the Patrick Swayze character from Roadhouse, which is a strange fit, but he does the job quite well. He has a bit of difficulty to be fully convincing in some of the action scenes, but I would say that his acting still managed to sell his action pretty well. You also have Simon Yam and Anthony Wong, who were the mainstay of category 3 film back then, and it's one of the only time, if I'm correct, where they actually act in the same film. You also have Anne Bridgewater, who was one of the most talented actress coming from Cinema City in the 80s, alongside Fanny Yun, and she really has a very sexualized and very adult performance. She doesn't really show any intimate body parts, but still, I mean, she's really there physically, and you feel her presence, and it's an interesting part for her, different from what she had done before. So the movie is very tacky, very vulgar, but also extremely entertaining, and for this reason, that's really a good watch if you are aware of what you are going to see. We move to 1994. As you can see, at that point in his career, Chow Yun-Fat had reduced his output compared to the end of the 80s. He didn't do any more 10 films in a year like he could have done at that time. And at that point of his career, he was more selective of his parts and doing like 2 or 3 films a year. And so in 1994, he did God of Gambler's Return for Wong Ting, in which he takes back the part of Ko Cho, the God of Gambler, in which he had appeared in the film of the same title. The God of Gambler series is a complicated case when it comes to continuity, because following the success of the original God of Gamblers, the film had turned into parody through Stephen Chow and All for the Winners, and Wong Ting had continued the series without Chow Yun-Fat, but with Stephen Chow instead. And in '94, that was the return of Chow Yun-Fat as the original God of Gambler. This sequel is a decent one when it comes once again to the Wong Ting scale, meaning you will have some stupid comedy, you will have some gambling scenes, you will have some action scenes, you will have a bit of romance, a bit of drama, some couple of crazy ideas, and you mix all this all together, and that's it. You have God of Gambler's Return, which once again is fairly decent when it comes to a Wong Ting film. Chow Yun-Fat is convincing as the God of Gambler. is actually pretending not to be for a good part of the film, so that leads to some funny interactions. Decent sequel from the Wong Ting universe, but nothing that memorable, obviously. And unfortunately for Chow Yun-Fat, this year 94 was not memorable in general for him, because the other film he did was Treasure Hunt, directed by Jeff Lowe. Jeff Lowe was one of the most successful and the most creative when it came to comedy in Hong Kong during that period of time. But unfortunately on Treasure Hunt he was not at his best. I must confess I don't remember that much about the film. It was set in Shaolin Temple. I think there was a character with some kind of supernatural powers. I think Chow Yun-Fat was supposed to protect him. There was a bit of a golden child vibe to it. But my memories are very cloudy, so I won't go much further. But I can say that the film was not really good. It didn't really leave any strong impression on me, so I would not recommend it. The year after, 95, he was in what was considered back then as his last Hong Kong film, which was Peace Hotel, directed by Wai Kar-fai. So Wai Kar-fai, some of you may know him because he became the in-house scriptwriter for Johnny To's Milky Way Image. He's considered as one of the best scriptwriter there is in Hong Kong. He seems indeed quite talented, and he seems to be always trying to do things different, which is a great quality. Unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not that convinced with the script he does. Almost all the film he has done as a solo director, solo scriptwriter, I haven't found them that convincing. And that's unfortunately the case on this Peace Hotel, which was the first film he directed. The concept is interesting because there is a bit of a Western vibe, an Eastern Western basically. And Chow Yun-Fat looks really cool on the poster with his Winchester and his hat, his cowboy hat. But the movie never really deliver as we could hope for. The duo between Chow Yun-Fat and Cecilia Yip is actually a bit annoying. Their love story is not pleasant to watch. The movie is basically not a pleasant one to watch. It's overlong. It feels like Wai Kar-fai didn't really know exactly in which direction he wanted to go, so it's a bit confusing. The photography is interesting because there is a bit of a black and white vibe to it, but it doesn't really elevate the film, unfortunately, and so it ends up being a bitter pill to swallow. Basically, it's not a pleasant film to watch. It had potential for sure, but unfortunately, the final result is not a very pleasant experience. And so after Peace Hotel, Chow Yun-Fat left Hong Kong. He left Hong Kong for Hollywood. That was the trend back then. A lot of directors and actors who had been popular in Hong Kong moved and tried their chance in Hollywood. And the first film he did there was Replacement Killer, directed by Antoine Fuqua. And Replacement Killer, it's basically the poor man's version of a John Woo film. It's not a bad film per se, but if you have already watched the John Woo films, that just feels like a Canada Dry. I mean, it's really the light version. They are the same kind of themes, the same kind of action scenes, but done less well than John Woo did. I guess it can be considered as a good introduction if you really don't know anything about Chow Yun-Fat and you don't want to come out from your comfort zone if you are used to only watch American, European films. So in this case, that can be a good introduction to Chow Yun-Fat. But if you are already familiar with what he has done in Hong Kong, there is no way you are not going to end up a bit disappointed after seeing him in Replacement Killer. One of the saving grace of the film, in my opinion, is the duo he he has with Mira Sorvino. Mira Sorvino was a up-and-coming actress back then, and she's a talented one. And so it's an interesting duo there is there, because she's not playing too much damsel in distress. I mean, she's fairly opinionated, and she has a personality of her own, and that makes for an interesting duo with Chow Yun-Fat. But still not that great of a film. Decent, watchable, but easily forgotten. The year after, he appeared in another cop and gangster story for The Corruptor. And The Corruptor is, in my opinion, the best movie Chow Yun-Fat has done when he was in the US. This time it's basically a buddy movie, but not in the comedy way. The film has a bit of a 70s gritty style to it. We have Chow Yun-Fat as an experienced cop specialized in Chinatown. He has to team up with Mark Wahlberg, a fairly green Mark Wahlberg back then. And so there is this dynamic of the experienced cop and the young cop who is discovering a dynamic a bit similar to Beast Cops, directed by Gordon Chan, actually, between Michael Wong and Anthony Wong. So Chow Yun-Fat here would be the Anthony Wong part, and Mark Wahlberg would be the Michael Wong part. The movie has this realistic style, realistic vibe, which really makes it a pleasant surprise. A bit old school kind of cops and gangster stories, and Chow Yun-Fat really fits in. I mean, he's very good at that. His character is well developed. He's doing a good performance, playing it despite the language difficulty he may have, because he has never been that fluent in English. But still, he is doing a good job, and the film by itself is a good film. So if there is only one film, well, let's say if there are only two films he has made in the US you should watch, The Corruptor is one of them. And the other one is actually the one he did the year after, in 2000, and that's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Well, I'm pretty sure you know about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It was a huge success on a worldwide scale. Also won several awards all over the world. What is interesting to note is that it's actually a surprising choice when you look at Chow Yun-Fat's filmography, because it's a wuxiapian, so it's a swordsman film, period swordsman film. And if you have paid attention to the two previous videos I did, you have probably noticed that Chow Yun-Fat actually has very rarely did period film, and even less wuxiapian. He did some when he was in TV, but when he transitioned to film, he actually did none of them. He did a couple of period films, but they were not wuxia per se. And so Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was actually his first film of this genre. And it was especially difficult for him because the film was shot in Mandarin, and he was not, once again, that fluent with Mandarin. So a lot of challenge actually for Chow Yun-Fat appearing in this film, playing Li Mubai, this legendary swordsman. He actually managed very well. I mean, he blends in this period universe pretty well. And as I've already said in the previous video, Chow Yun-Fat is not the most physical actor there is. He's a very good actor, but he's not someone who is good at doing kung fu, who is good at doing crazy action scenes, actually. But he managed to be convincing, fortunately for him, in wuxia universe. You don't necessarily need to be a great martial artist. There are a lot of tricks you can use. They use them here, and it works well. And Chow Yun-Fat as Li Mubai has a very commanding presence, and it works very well for the film. He really gives a good performance in that, and he shows that he is a versatile actor who can act a wide range of parts and who can be in a wide range of universe. I also want to make a slight digression about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because I know the film has fairly bad reputation in the Hong Kong film fan community because it's seen as the only wuxia that people know, and because of that it's often considered by the mainstream audience as the best wuxia ever. If you have seen a few wuxia, you know there are a lot of other films in this genre with very different style which are as good, if not better. If you ask me personally, I would not rank Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon as the top 10 wuxia. I think it's a good wuxia, but I would not put it in the top 10. And for this reason, a lot of Hong Kong film fans hate the film because they feel like it's not worthy. I can understand this feeling, but I think it's a bit unfair to the film because it's still an interesting attempt, an interesting film being done. It has a different vibe compared to the other wuxia made in Hong Kong, because Ang Lee has a more Western sensitivity, and the scriptwriter is also a Western guy. So of course the film has a different style and vibe compared to other wuxia which were made in Hong Kong before. Still, I think that's actually what makes it interesting, because of this different atmosphere, of this different sensibility. It brings something new to the table, and for that I think it should be indeed commended. I mean, we should appreciate the film for this reason alone, on the fact that it is well handled. I mean, the actors are all doing a good job. The action choreography by Yuen Ping is good quality, and everything technically is well handled. The story is appealing enough. So I think we should appreciate Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, recognize its quality, while at the same time remain aware that it's not the alpha and the omega of wuxia. And if you like Chow Yun-Fat, of course it's a must-watch. Not his best film, not his best performance, of course, but still very good ones. Very good film, very good performance from him. So it's certainly warranted to have a watch of the film. Then in 2003, Chow Yun-Fat was once again in American film. In this case, that was a Bulletproof Monk. Bulletproof Monk is an adaptation of a comic book, fairly liberal adaptation, if I'm right. Once again, there is a bit of a golden child vibe to the film, with Chow Yun-Fat being this a guy with supernatural power and was to find back some sutras, I think. I don't even remember very well the film, the story, but I remember it was actually pretty bad. It really felt like a generic Hollywood action film with no personality, with nothing to say, just there to get a few bucks quickly, with a big marketing campaign, and that's it. And it really felt like a studio film without any soul. So yeah, no, Bulletproof Monk, it's not a good film. It's better avoid it, in my opinion. At that point of his career, Chow Yun-Fat's stay in Hollywood was a mixed bag, as you can see from the couple of films I have reviewed. And so he started to do what other directors and other actors had also started to do, which was appear in mainland Hong Kong co-productions. That's where the money was, and that's where the professional opportunities were. He had more opportunities to have some more interesting parts compared to the one which he was proposed in Hollywood. And so he started to appear in some productions from mainland, one of them being Curse of the Golden Flower, directed by Zhang Yimou. So the film is the final act of an informal wuxia period trilogy for Zhang Yimou. The first one being Hero, the second one being Secret of the Flying Dagger, if I remember correctly. Maybe I got the title wrong. I will correct it if needed. And the last one being Curse of the Golden Flower. Curse of the Golden Flower doesn't have a great reputation, and I think it's not deserved, actually. In my opinion, Curse of the Golden Flower is the best film of the three. It has this epic scale. It's basically a palace story. I mean, a bit like what you had from Lian Xiang in the 70s. Those films with political intrigues in the Forbidden City in China during different time period. And that's really what is at the heart of Curse of the Golden Flower. You have all the pageantry you can expect from such a big mainland production. You have huge sets, you have a lot of extra, you have very impressive costumes. I mean, all the technical aspects are really top-notch. It's a bit vulgar to some extent. It's often bad taste, you can say. But it's always impressive, at least when it comes to the artistic direction. Chow Yun-Fat is playing the emperor, and he has really a good presence. I think at this point of his career, he had really all the experience and all the authority needed to play such a part. So he does it here with really a commanding presence. The story itself is a bit Shakespearean by some aspects of it. So if you want something a bit Shakespearean, if you want something a bit political with a lot of betrayals, and you want it in a impressive but a bit tacky aesthetic, well, Curse of the Golden Flower then is the perfect film for you. In 2007, Chow Yun-Fat appeared in the third episode of the Pirates of the Caribbean series. There is not much to say about it because he has basically a glorified cameo. He looks great as this Chinese pirate, but outside of his appearance, there is not much to say. I mean, his character is not really developed. So it's fun. It's nice to see him in a series like that, but there is nothing special about his performance in the film. In 2008, he was in Children of Huang Shi, which was a co-production between Hollywood and mainland. That was the beginning of this trend of trying to have co-productions between the two countries. The Children of Huang Shi was directed by Roger Spottiswoode, and it was the story of a group of Westerners and Chinese who tried to save some orphans from the devastation of the Sino-Japanese War. I must confess I don't have a lot of memory of the film, but from what I remember, it was a decent offering. It was a decent drama, well handled technically, nothing outstanding in any aspects, but everything was done correctly, and it made for a pleasant watch. A really decent film, not the best for either Roger Spottiswoode or Chow Yun-Fat, but still a really okay film to watch. That is not the case of the film he did in 2009, which is the horrible Dragon Ball Evolution, so an adaptation of the famous manga by Akira Toriyama. Where to start? The movie is awful. I mean, there isn't any other way to describe it. It's awful. It's horrible. It's a complete disaster. Just the idea of doing a live adaptation of Dragon Ball is already very weird, because the the manga and the animation is really it creates a universe of its own, which would be very difficult to make believable in a live action environment. And the idea also of putting Son Goku in this kind of American universe. I mean, there are a lot of American teen films being added to the story in order, I guess, to make it more familiar to the American audience. But it creates a even weirder feeling. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't blend the Akira Toriyama universe on this kind of American teenage film cliche. So it's a complete disaster. But having said that, Chow Yun-Fat is not bad in it. I would say it's actually the only thing decent in there. He's playing Kame Sennin, who is the master, the Sifu of the Son Goku character. He absolutely doesn't look like the part if you are basing yourself on the manga or the animation. I guess they just wanted to have a famous Asian actor to put in the film, and that was the only part he could fit in. But once again, having said that, he's doing it quite convincingly. That's basically the only time that Chow Yun-Fat was able to bring his comedy chop in an Hollywood film. And I think he probably had more fun doing this film than something like the Replacement Killer or Bulletproof Monk. He usually likes to do comedy, and he's able to provide a couple of good laughs sometimes in the film. So yeah, I would say he's one of the only redeeming quality that this awful Dragon Ball Evolution has. Does it mean you should watch the film for him? Yeah, not really. You should still probably better avoid it, or at least watch all the other films which I recommended before. And then if you are really still wanting to watch more Chow Yun-Fat, then you can try your chance on this one. But be aware that you are going to watch a really full-scale disaster there. And Chow Yun-Fat may have been aware, or maybe it's because the movie was also a financial disaster, that he finally chose to leave Hollywood and to move back to Hong Kong to work in the big mainland Hong Kong co-production, or just mainland production, but the one, of course, with a huge budget. And one of them was released in 2010, and that's a biopic of Confucius. Confucius being one of the most influential philosopher, thinker, political advisor in the Chinese history, and his influence is still present nowadays in China, but even further in Korea, for example, and in other places all over Asia. So it's a hugely influential character, and so that makes sense in a way that someone as famous and someone as talented as Chow Yun-Fat would be chosen to play the part. Unfortunately, the film is a bit bland. It doesn't have much to say about the character. It really lacks some personality given the influence that Confucius had, and it ends up being a bit disappointing. Chow Yun-Fat is okay in the part. I mean, you can believe he is Confucius, so he does his job fairly well, but the film itself just doesn't have much to say. Of course, it's using some of the famous quotes of Confucius, but it doesn't really provide much insight about how he came up with this philosophy, why it became so influential, what made it that different from other philosophy back then. It just feels like a generic mainland production, one of those big period productions. So you will have, of course, big armies, you will have some big landscapes, but they don't really serve any clear purpose, unfortunately. So yeah, disappointing. Let the Bullet Fly was directed by Jiang Wen, and with Jiang Wen was a more interesting film. It's some kind of variation, I would say, on Yojimbo. Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, with a character going into a city pretending to be the governor, while actually is some kind of militia leader, and is trying to take advantage of the situation in order to make the most money. And he has in front of him the criminal leader of the town, who is played by Chow Yun-Fat. Let the Bullet Fly has many qualities, but it's not a very good film either. The problem being that Jiang Wen is a bit self-indulging when it comes to the film, and he wants to put a lot of elements, he wants to put a lot of characters, he wants to put a lot of things, a lot of themes in the film, and at the end it ends up being a bit messy. So the first part of the film is really good. It's a good way to introduce the characters, to introduce the situation. It's quite energetic, so you think you are going to be in for a good ride, but once he is in the town, despite some good ideas there and there, it starts to slow down and gets a bit muddy in the story. Still, it has enough qualities to be a recommendation, and Chow Yun-Fat gives a good performance, and he has a good partner in Jiang Wen. So for these reasons, despite its flaws, Let the Bullet Fly is still a recommendation in my book. The last film he did in 2010 was the last production he did for Hollywood, in this case being a co-production being between mainland and Hollywood. That was Shanghai, so set in the 1930s, when Shanghai was divided into foreign concessions, and when the Japanese were going to start the war with Japan. This background is obviously great for stories. I mean, you can have so many different stories being told with all these different people being in the same place, being in Shanghai, with also all the nightlife there was back then, all the suffering there was also from the little people. I mean, you have a lot of ingredients which can make great stories. And aside from Chow Yun-Fat, you also have Gong Li in the film. So everything was set for this film to be great. But no, that doesn't work. The film doesn't deliver. It's once again a bland affair. Hard to say exactly what went wrong. I think the actors do a good job, but it's basically the story. The story is not that interesting, which is a shame if you consider the time period chosen, the situation. I mean, so many things could have been done, but it just doesn't deliver. It's bland, it's emotionless, and at the end of the day, you won't remember the film very long after watching it. So I would not recommend it, unfortunately. In 2014, he was the Jade Emperor in the Monkey King adaptation by Soi Chung. The Jade Emperor being the highest divinity possible in China. I think he's doing a good job as the Jade Emperor. He's really has this authority. He's really able to project his charisma and his presence on other characters. So it's really a good choice for the part, and I think it delivers what we expect from him. Unfortunately, the first Monkey King by Soi Cheng is a bit of a mess. It's basically an overdose of CGI, and many of them being not that convincing, and that's what you end up remembering most of the film. It lacks a bit focus on the story as well. It's basically a special effect orgy, and it's a bit overpowering. It's a bit too much for the eyes and for the the mind of the audience, especially as the story itself is not that compelling. So not a great film. Still, I would advise, if you like Chow Yun-Fat, to watch it anyway, because it's nice to see him playing the God of God, basically. So for this reason alone, worth a check, worth a watch, but don't expect anything great. Don't expect anything great also from his participation of the From Vegas to Macau series. It's back with Wang Jing for him, which he hadn't worked for since '94, so 20 years after. If you want this kind of stupid entertainment, to call it this way, I don't have better way to describe it, then you will be satisfied with the From Vegas to Macau series. It's mindless, harmless fun. Doesn't have much continuity between the different films. Chow Yun-Fat is having fun, as he always had when he was working with Wang Jing. It's always nice to see him. It's always nice to see he's ready to make fun of himself. So worth a watch once again, especially as this kind of big co-production with time are losing some of their Hong Kong touch, some of their craziness, because the mainland side is becoming more and more influential. So I guess from this point of view, the From Vegas to Macau series is not a bad choice if you want this kind of film. In 2015, he worked with another director he was familiar with when he was working in Hong Kong in the 80s and early 90s, and which he had not worked with for a long time. That is Johnny To on The Office. The Office being a musical mixing comedy and drama with an interesting aesthetic, with very stylized sets, which really makes it quite unique. The film is a mixed bag. I think it's an interesting attempt, because there are not been many musical in recent years from Hong Kong, and even if in this case that's a mainland Hong Kong co-production. But this kind of genre is not something being done very often in China in general, if you want to put it that way. And so that's an interesting attempt, but not far from perfect. Sometimes the music and the story don't blend that much. It could be more compelling, but still the film has a huge cast, has a masterful direction by Johnny To. So it's still a recommendation. It's still a film you should watch if you have the opportunity, and especially if you like Chow Yun-Fat. In 2006, he was in another big production called Cold War 2. So the first Cold War was a big success, and it's a weird kind of film. It's really a film dealing more with the technicalities and the legalities of police action in Hong Kong, especially in the one country, two system configuration. And so that's a surprising choice. It's more police procedural in a way than anything else. It's not your usual cops and gangster story. that makes the specificity of the film, and that's what makes it interesting. That's also the main flaw of the film, which means it's very very talky. There are a lot of dialogues. It's a lot of characters facing each other, looking serious and trying to intimidate and trying to convince the others that they are the ones who should be put in charge of the police action. That's not the most exciting thing you will see, but it's certainly especially interesting now that the one country two system is basically dead since the introduction of the national security law. It's especially interesting to watch back those films to see what they were trying to show of the Hong Kong system, of trying to safeguard the Hong Kong system, the Hong Kong autonomy, now that unfortunately this autonomy has basically been removed. And Chow Yun-Fat in the second is playing some kind of super lawyer, if I remember correctly, either a super lawyer or a super law teacher, someone really very good in this field. He has a supporting part. He's not the main character. It's a good supporting part, and I think Cold War 2 is a bit better when it comes to mixing its story, its theme about legality, about police procedures, and having at the same time some action scenes, a bit more entertainment in it. The Cold War 2 is quite good. I think it's a quite good film, and Chow Yun-Fat's performance is fine as well. Not a great film, but good enough to have a look. I think you can actually watch the second part without having watched the first part, but of course you will appreciate it better if you watch the first part first. So yeah, recommendation in my book, small recommendation. And the last film that Chow Yun-Fat has appeared in was Project Gutenberg, released 2 years ago in 2018. The film is directed by Felix Chong, who you may be aware of because he was the scriptwriter of the Infernal Affair trilogy. It's an interesting attempt to find back the spirit of Hong Kong filmmaking, Hong Kong gangster cop stories from the 80s. You have it's about counterfeit money, a bit like what you saw in A Better Tomorrow, but it tries to blend it with a more sophisticated approach of cops and gangster stories from Hong Kong in the year 2000s and after. The result when it comes to this blend of style is I found it satisfying enough, but be aware that some of the ideas which are in the story are basically borrowed from other films, in this case some Hollywood films, and that may be a bit frustrating for you. Personally, I accepted it, and it didn't spoil my pleasure in watching the film, but I can understand that for some people they would find it annoying to see the same kind of twist that they already saw in other films. Having said that, that's really the Chow Yun-Fat show, basically. That's a film where you can see Chow really using his full palette as an actor, his full range. You will see him being the action hero, like what you liked from the John Woo film. You will see him being more comedy guy. You will see being dramatic. You will really see him in all kind of emotions. You will really see him do his full range as an actor. And for that, of course, the film is great. I mean, if you like Chow Yun-Fat, Project Gutenberg is a must-see. He's really able to shine and to really show the full extent of his talent. So for this reason alone, the film is a must-watch for anybody who loves Chow Yun-Fat. As I said, the film has its flaws. story-wise mostly. So be aware of it. I would say be tolerant. Don't be too hard. Don't forget that now when they are doing this kind of mainland Hong Kong co-production, there are a lot of limitations. There are a lot of constraints from the mainland censorship. If you want more information about that, you can check my video about Hong Kong cinema being dead and the follow-up video I did after. You will have more detail about it. So you have to be a bit lenient when they are doing this kind of film in this difficult configuration. But still, Project Gutenberg is a good film, and it has a great performance, a great Chow Yun-Fat, so you should watch it for sure. That's it, and we have finished this filmography, this retrospective of Chow Yun-Fat filmography. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you learned some new information you didn't necessarily know about those films. I hope you have been curious about some of the films I've been talking about, and you will go check them. If you have any question, as usual, don't hesitate to put them in the comment. If you like this kind of exercise, you can suggest some other names of actors, directors for me to comment, to do a retrospective on. And I will see you in the next video in a couple of weeks. See you very soon.